All right, hello. I'd like to take a minute and just talk about Habakkuk. So, Habakkuk is one of those books in the Bible that doesn't get a lot of attention. It's certainly not as famous as Genesis and Exodus, but it has an incredible story to it that I wanted to share. So, here is the basics. Habakkuk happens at the time when the children of Israel, I'll kind of back up to Ezekiel. They had been, Jerusalem had been destroyed by Babylon and they'd been pushed out into exile. Assyria or Persia took it back, control, and allowed the Israelites, children of Israel, to go back and live in Jerusalem. And when they went, the there was a bit of an interesting situation unfolded. And the first thing is mentioned here in Haggai. Oh, sorry, I said Habakkuk. I'm talking about Haggai. Back up. We're talking about Haggai. Anyway, in Haggai chapter 1, verse 2 through 4, the Lord's basically pointing out, hey, you said you were going to work on the temple, but nothing's been done. All you did was work on your own house. And basically that's what happened. They were working on their own houses and ignored the temple, said, we'll get to it later. And I think this fundamental pattern is repeating itself. And it's just this idea of where is our priority? What is the center of our life? And I've often used this diagram in seminary. I think it actually describes pretty well the difference between a self-centered life and a Christ-centered life. So the difference here in basic form is that when we're selfish, we rebel against those that are higher than us or above us, and we oppress those that are below us. Because, people higher than us, what do they know? They don't know, so we're going to rebel against them because we're smarter than them, right? People below us, what's their point other than to serve us, other than to be there for us? And so that's the self-centered life. And a Christ-centered life is the fundamental opposite of that. It's basically the idea of submitting to the higher powers, and thereby becoming one with them. And it's also sacrificing for those that are poorer than us, or those that are beneath us in some way. And beneath us, it just means poor in whatever way it is. And by sacrificing for them, we also become one with them. So you could argue, and I do make the argument, that the people in Haggai's day were focused excessively on their own house and completely forgot the house of the Lord. And what's interesting is this pattern is emphasized as the result of it. So here's the result. The Lord says to Haggai, consider your ways. You've sown much and bring in little. You eat, but have not enough. You drink, but are not filled. You clothe, but are not warm. You earn wages, but put it into a bag with holes. And this is just the fundamental pattern of self-centeredness or a worldly orientation in our life. When we have this self-centeredness or worldly orientation, we experience these false promises. So we get allured by these promises that end up being completely false, hollow in a sense. And that's what all of this means: earning wages, putting it into a bag with holes. It all leaks out and it doesn't work. I like the analogy of Cain and Abel. So here's Abel. He lives on the earth, but his focus is toward heaven. And his goal is to connect the two. He wants to be a bridge. Cain is too focused on the earth. Here he is, he's digging. It's kind of a weird picture, but yeah, he's just too focused on the things of the world. And by so doing, he reaps the whirlwind. I really like this painting. in the Abel is depicted here as the humble one on his knees who makes the proper sacrifice. And Abel is here not on his knees. And one reason I think could be that he's so wrapped up in this concern of self-sufficiency that he doesn't want to be vulnerable to lower order issues like a tiger. The best way to defend yourself against a tiger is don't be kneeling. For one, you can have a much better attack stance if you're in Cain's position here. Whereas Abel's like, I don't care what happens with tigers. That's not my concern. I'm worried much more about what the Lord thinks. And Cain is having this experience of this worldly focus ends up just blowing back in our face. It ends up not working out and ultimately being a bunch of hollow promises. And so Haggai has prophesied these things. He's told what the Lord has said to the people, and he's basically seeing this change. And he's seeing that the people are starting to fear the Lord. And I love this idea of fearing the Lord because it puts into focus the way in which we can think about how the Lord makes himself superior in a way to the worldly concerns or worldly fears. So I drew this diagram. Here's another diagram. This is like things we might fear. Beneath us, the baseline would be us, me. And below that, we don't really fear babies or children, maybe a little bit more. We don't really fear weak people, very, very, very thin and frail people. But somebody who's super strong, yeah, there might be a little bit of fear there. If they were very angry, person with a knife, yeah, we're going to fear that even more. Person with a gun that's very angry, yeah, we're going to fear that person even more. And then it gets even worse. A person with a tank, army, guns, tanks, that's scary. But the ultimate fear, and I think respect is actually an even sometimes more appropriate word, really belongs with the Lord. And perfect example of this, I think, is the Nuremberg trials with the Nazi war criminals. And the Nazi war criminals were put on trial for things that they did in the concentration camps. And their defense in the Nuremberg trials was, I'm just following orders. People above me commanded that I do this and would kill me if I didn't. Well, that was viewed as an invalid defense. And the reason is they should have feared the fundamental pattern of what they were involved in much more than their life. They should have actually feared the Lord, in a sense, or the broad, taking this idea of what the Lord can represent, this transcendent pattern of reality that will enforce itself on the evil that is present with the Nazis. So the answer was basically, you know what, you shouldn't have obeyed those orders, and yeah, you might have lost your life. It's really sobering, but it's really powerful too. You can see this in a lot of the great heroes of our history, human history, are those that sacrifice their life for out of a deeper respect for the greater good and over their own life, their own local situation. And I think that's what the fear of the Lord is. It's, you need to fear. I need to be much more concerned about the long-term consequences and the overarching transcendent pattern that's at play with my actions than the local consequences or short-term consequences that are a factor. And In order to do this, though, you have to have an idea of life after death, of a resurrection, and that's why this all maps to a clear, meaningful purpose. But at any rate, the point of this is Haggai prophesies this. And the people do start to fear the Lord, and then they get to work on the temple, and the temple ends up being not that great. They start thinking, oh, this isn't as good as it used to be. The good old days that we had a much better temple back in the day. And the Lord says, hey, don't worry about that. It's going to be even better. And that's where here at the end, he kind of explains that the glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former, saith the Lord, and in this place I will give space, or give peace for the Lord of hosts. I included this quote by Elder Maxwell. Neil A. Maxwell once said, it is it's really critical that we realize these are our days. You know, this focus on the good old days as and almost this nostalgic view can be okay, but our charge that the Lord has given us is our day. We live in this day. It's our responsibility to be a part of it, to make it better, and to help those around us, to sacrifice, to, again, kind of going back to this fundamental pattern, sacrifice for those poorer than us. Poorer, and it's not just money, it's anything that they're poorer in. If they're poorer in spirit, and hopes and dreams and understanding or knowledge, our responsibility to sacrifice for them. And by doing so, we become one with them. And simultaneously submitting to the higher powers. And by doing so, becoming one with them as well, just like Christ did. And that's the book of Haggai. Thanks.